Hi, thanks for joining me today. I'm Karen Bybee, and today I'm going to talk to you about getting off the starting block, international sports and events opportunities. Let me just start by sharing with you an experience that I had in the 2010 Vancouver Winter Olympic Games. The morning after the opening ceremonies, the very first day of events, we had 250 VVIPs who were the guests of our major sponsor for the event. We were taking them up to Whistler for the men's downhill. About 2 hours before we were supposed to board the buses, we got word that the event was being canceled due to slushy conditions and heavy fog. That left us with 2 hours to figure out how to restructure the day for 250 VVIPs. In having to communicate to them the change of plans, how to arrange the transportation changes. We had to secure tickets for new events, and we couldn't just get any ticket. We needed to have premier tickets for these VVIPs. It was an exercise in event planning at its best, and we had to come up with a new plan of action. And that, unfortunately or fortunately, is the reality of working in the event industry and working with international sports. So some people love this. You'll see from my roller coaster examples, some people are adrenaline junkies and love this kind of experience. And there are others for whom this would be a terrifying experience. So only you know whether you fall into the former camp or the latter camp. But I thought today I would talk about some of the opportunities, give you a little bit of idea about the industry now, share with you a little bit of my background so that you can put this into context. And then I wanted to give you 3 suggestions for getting started, getting off the starting blocks, if you will, and then just some final observations. So that's what I hope to accomplish as we go through the next 30 to 40 minutes here. By way of introduction, the industry has changed a lot since I first got involved in it. Thankfully, I was not involved with the Fire Festival. I had nothing to do with that. But I think that underscores just from the power of digital marketing and the power of how much has changed since I first got into the industry almost 30 years ago. And by way of background, I graduated from BYU in public relations. I went to Washington, D.C. and started working for a congressman as his assistant press secretary, making barely above the poverty wage, and then was hired to work for a senator. I was originally doing some legislative aid kinds of things for the senator, but it was very clear that my heart was in doing events, things that we could do that would strengthen the senator's position with women, the things he was doing for seniors. So I kind of morphed that role into working with special events. And it was while I was working for the senator that I got a call out of the clear blue, asking me if I would join the 1994 World Cup Organizing Committee. The United States had just been awarded the rights to host the World Cup. At that time, soccer was virtually unknown in the United States. FIFA clearly recognized that this was the next frontier, and in terms of sponsorship dollars and marketing opportunities, the U.S. was a goldmine. The United States had been very actively soliciting this bid, and in 1988, they were awarded the rights. My good friend, Scott Letelier, was named the head of the organizing committee. Scott hired his secretary, and then he called me. So I was the third person employed to organize and stage the 1994 World Cup. And I spent 6 years as part of that organizing committee. It was almost like a startup, like today's startup, because we had to wear so many hats. I was the receptionist, I was the marketing department, I was the payroll department, I was the janitorial department, I was every role that ever needed to be played when there were just initially 4 of us that started. But it was an incredible opportunity to start with something at the very beginning stages and to see it all the way through to fruition. And in the course of wearing all those different hats, it was an amazing opportunity to learn how we organize and stage an event from the ground up. It was a remarkable experience, and from that, I was able then to make tremendous contacts in the event industry. And a point I'll come back to later is that relationships, this is a very tight industry. You see the same people surfacing over and over again. And so in the course of my 25 years in the industry. I worked on 4 soccer World Cups, one of them being the 1999 Women's World Cup. And I was involved with 8 Olympic Games and 2 Ryder Cups for golf. I've done a women's volleyball Grand Prix. I was the director of player relations for 2 years for a PGA Tour event, a number of events in the event industry. And in recent years, I've kind of decided to hang up that sports hat and have been involved with international events for several corporate clients. So it's that background by which I share with you my experience. Many things have changed. It's very rare that somebody's going to get a call out of the clear blue these days asking them to join an organizing committee. But spoiler alert, there are still a lot of same principles that apply from when I started in this industry so many years ago for people who are starting out today. So I kind of want to explore some of those with you today, share with you some of my observations. I've also been talking with some of my colleagues who are still very actively involved in the industry so that I can get the benefit of their current thinking and their current experiences. So let's just talk a little bit about the international sports industry. And I think I'd like to say here that I will talk mostly about sports, but some of the principles and things that we're talking about today are very applicable to the event industry as well. The nuances, some of the things may be different, but a lot of the principles are exactly the same. So I hope this will be applicable in a broad breadth here. But just a couple of things about the industry. You see the same people over and over again. It is a very tight-knit organization, and it's very important when people find people who they trust their work product, they enjoy working with them. You will see these same people showing up over and over again. I would say that the industry has changed a lot in that now there is so much competition to get into this. So generally the pay is less because they can afford to pay less. And there's so much interest and so many more opportunities than there used to be. And so I would say the more global the experience, an Olympics, a World Cup, a Ryder Cup, something like that, probably the more competitive and maybe the less you'll be compensated for it, just because there is so much demand. A friend who is recently hiring for an entry-level sports marketing position had 379 applications for that one job. They narrowed it down to about 70, then they whittled it down to about 14, and then went down to a final 4. But that's what it looks like these days, and the competition is great. So I think it's a lot harder than it used to be. One thing that was very key for my career in international sports was we were riding a wave of great events that had come to North America. It started with the 1984 Olympic Games in Los Angeles, which completely revolutionized the way that Olympic Games are organized and staged, bringing in sponsorship dollars. And Peter Ueberroth completely revolutionized those Olympic Games. So we had all of these people who had 1984 experience. Then we had the 1994 World Cup, which was in 9 cities across the United States. And then we went to the 1996 Olympic Games in Atlanta, Georgia. And then we had the 1999 Women's World Cup in many cities across the country. And then we had the 2002 Salt Lake Olympics. So we had a really great decade and a half of big global events that were here in the United States. The exciting thing, I think, is that 30 years later, we're starting to see this cycle repeat itself. We've got the 2023 World University Games that are going to take place in Lake Placid. You've got the 2026 North American World Cup, which will primarily be based in the United States, but also will have games in Canada and in Mexico. You've got the 2028 Summer Olympic Games in Los Angeles. And you've got Salt Lake potentially bidding for the 2030 or the 2034 Winter Games. So what I think is it's a great opportunity. It is perfect timing to start getting in and positioning yourself for some of these global opportunities. It's much easier to do this when the events are in the United States than when they are abroad. I can't tell you how many people contacted me in the last year saying, I serve my mission in Japan. How can I get involved with the Japanese organizing committee? That's a really hard thing to make happen because they're obviously going to hire their Japanese nationals unless there's some skill that they just can't source there. But when it's in the North America, when it's in the United States, it's much easier to be part of an organizing committee or to be involved with a sponsor or one of the federations. And so I think there's a tremendous opportunity here for people who are looking to get involved with global sports because of these events that are on the horizon. And if you want to see what that calendar is, just Google World Sporting Event Calendar and you'll be able to see the location and dates of where these are for the next decade. So, and surprisingly, many people are shocked to find out that organizing committees for these big scale events, the global events we're talking about, usually are organized starting about 7 years out. So they obviously hire very slowly and then ramp up and then really ramp up closer to the times of the games. But many of these plans are well underway and these committees are already functioning. So the good news is that it's a great project. These are great projects. They're very exciting and they're incredible experience and opportunities. Kind of the bad news is that after a short period of time, you're out of a job and everybody else who also has that experience is also competing with you for other opportunities. So you kind of have to start all over again. And I think I just have to tell you here that while these are great opportunities, not all countries have the same resources the United States does or organize in the same way. And I just have to share with you that when I was working on the Sochi Winter Games in Sochi, Russia, the night before I was leaving, my colleague who was on the ground in Sochi sent me an email that said, you better bring a headlamp and extra batteries for when the power goes out. And I thought, what? Are you kidding me? And we got there to find out that Sochi was putting all of their resources into getting their Olympic park and their venues ready. And so our hotel, which had Olympic sponsors in it, had no beds. It had no hot water. We had wiring without caps, just hanging wires. And we had no internet. We had no phone. We had no TVs. And I can just tell you that a cold shower is a really cold shower. But a cold shower in February in Russia is a really cold shower. So thankfully they pulled it together, but we had to be very resourceful. Also in Sochi, our shipment didn't arrive until the last 5 days of the Olympic program. So we were getting very creative and very resourceful as we had to find ways to compensate for the Olympic program of one of our major sponsors. So I just share with you, those are some of the things that you have to expect and kind of what makes this all so interesting. Going back to my earlier point, if you either love this kind of stuff and you thrive on it, or you need the desk job with 9 to 5. So, lots of ways to get into, let's talk first about sports. There's lots of ways that you can get into the sports market. We've talked a little bit about some of the global opportunities, Olympics, soccer, World Cup, Golf Ryder Cup, X Games, Special Olympics, Huntsman Senior Games, World Police and Fire Games, Youth Olympics. I mean, there's many, many of these that are on a global basis. There are also agencies, sports management agencies that work with the sponsors and work with programs for these in the brands like Octagon, GMR, Integrated Sports Solutions, Jet Set Sports, IMG, there's a lot of them. You've got sponsors, which is another way to come into this, working with a major sponsor. Coca-Cola, Visa, Procter & Gamble, McDonald's, Samsung, all major sponsors. And along with that, you have major suppliers and licensees. So a supplier might be like an airline or a hotel company or communications or insurance. And licensees are going to do official products, mascots, apparel, those kinds of things. There are local organizing committees, which again are much easier to do when they're being held in the host country to get part of an organizing committee than it is to try to get on in another country. But you've got sports federations like the International Governing Body of Soccer, FIFA, or FIG, which is the Gymnastics Federation, or FINA. So you've got international federations. You've got national Olympic committees. You've got professional organizations like the NFL or the NBA, collegiate sports. And one that has really, I think, come and taken people by surprise are esports, which is the gaming industry. And I think a lot of people think that this is an area that's really going to be growing, and my industry friends tell me it is here, that this is actually the space where there's going to be the most growth opportunity because it's not yet saturated. And this meets a whole market of people who maybe don't have the athletic skills, but have other skills on an international level. So keep your eye on the esports industry. I think from everything that I hear, that's where there's some real growth potential and an opportunity to break in. So lots of, and those esports will still need people to help with logistics and analytics and many things similar to these other organizing committee events. For those who are looking to do maybe an industry event, not necessarily sports, but to get involved with corporations, generally I think that starts domestic and then programs move to be international, but there are so many ways that you can get experience and get involved from an event standpoint, starting with hotels or destination management companies or convention and visitor bureaus or trade show management. Some people do wedding planning. There's trade associations, entertainment, Congress management, travel directors. There's just a whole host of ways that people can get into the event industry, again, to get some experience. And if international is really where you have your eye, a lot of those corporate programs have incentive trips or have programs that they do internationally. I've been involved just this past year with a major tech company that's on an international tech tour, which has taken me to several countries around the world. So there are opportunities for that as well, particularly if the international is where your interest lies. Okay, so I'll put a couple of these slides up so that you can see just some of the things that I've mentioned here. But let me give you 3 tips, 3 items of advice that I would suggest. People ask me all the time, how do I get started in this industry? And again, my personal experience is not a great indicator of what it's going to be like for others. It was a very rare, and I recognize a very wonderful opportunity that kind of fell into my lap. Nowadays, you're going to have to work for it. So let me share with you a couple of suggestions that I have for how you can get started. And spoiler alert, there is really nothing new here. It is tried and true. But the first one, and you hear it all the time, is network, network, network. And I have to say that has been the hallmark of my career. Virtually every job I have ever had has come through networking, has come through a relationship that I built, or someone that I worked with, and suddenly there's a need. When I ended up joining this international tech tour, somebody had to drop out at the last minute, and somebody called me that I had worked with many years ago and said, would you be interested? And suddenly I found myself with a whole new program and traveling internationally. So it is all about networking and making those relationships. And I think it's important. People think that networking is maybe just meeting people, and it is so much more than that. It is really building a relationship. It is establishing and maintaining those relationships and not going into it with an idea of what can I get out of this, but more of how can I build this relationship? How can I support this person? How can they help me learn and grow in this field and in this industry? So I think that's really important to maintain. I think too that you need to have a really well-rounded plan for how you're going to generate and how you're going to network. I would start first with who you know in your circle, who in your family, what about your friends, what about your church community, clubs, interest groups. Then you branch out and look at LinkedIn, and then there are job boards and global sports sites, and there's social media with Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. There are professional associations. Have to put in a plug for our BYU alumni chapters and BYU Connect, which is also involved with mentoring and networking our students and our alumni. And then, who do you know? Because what you need to do is build a web of connections. Who do you know that might know someone that you can talk to? Who do you know that might be able to just help you get a little bit more insight into this area or might have some recommendations and suggestions for you, or know someone else that you could talk to. So what you want to do is kind of build that web. And along the way, if you can find a mentor, that is even better. That's a great suggestion for you. I think getting and doing informational interviews is really, really helpful when you're starting out. But I would say it's really important to do your homework first. Know something about the company, know something about the individual. They're giving up some of their time. I wouldn't take more than about 15 minutes max. But they're giving up some precious time to share information with you. So come prepared and do your homework so that you can ask them important questions and get their insights. But that's a wonderful way. I think you have to go into those informational interviews not expecting that they're going to try to offer you a job, but it's a wonderful way to meet someone, to make a connection, to build a relationship. And who knows, down the road, if the opportunities or they hear of something, they may remember you and then have your contact information. So I think those are really important. Your whole goal here is getting from, and I have this a slide for you, getting from that big stack down to the little pile. Ultimately, you're going to have to prove yourself once you get to the little pile, but that's your goal. For my friend who was doing this interviewing for this junior marketing position, or event coordinator position, 379 resumes, and had to whittle that down to finding the final 4. So that's your goal, is finding people who can help you get from that big pile to the little pile, and then you're going to have to merit it and do it all on your own. Okay, so my second point here then is you've built your plan for how you're going to network and you're going to make people, and be very proactive in all of these areas. And certainly LinkedIn is a very important one for people. But don't put all your eggs in one basket with social media or thinking that Uncle Henry's going to be able to get you that job. I think you need to have a really well coordinated plan that touches on many of these components. The second is to build your resume and get experience. And sometimes that's the hardest one. People who are in school don't have a lot of discretionary time. People who have families don't have a lot of time. But I think there are a couple of things that you can do here as you're building your resume. And one thing that I would say is make sure that your resume is very individualized for the job for which you are applying. In this digital age, I think it's very easy for people to send out 25 generic resumes to all of these companies and just blanket them. And I think that people who are going through these resumes quickly, my friend who was getting those 379 took about 300 of them right off the bat and said, this doesn't show any thought. It doesn't show any knowledge of our company or of what we're doing. So if you have to have 30 different resumes that are each individually customized for the companies that you're applying for, I think that's a much better strategy. Tailor it to the specific company so that not the one size fits all. You want to highlight your achievements and demonstrate that extra that's going to distinguish you. And keep in mind that many companies now sometimes will ask you they give you an assignment. They'll ask you to come back with some analytics to show a little bit about your digital marketing, which is becoming increasingly important. And so they're going to look for different ways to assess your hard and soft skills. So I would also say that you want to make sure that your resume is clear on what you've done. If you were part of a group project, make sure you highlight what your contribution was to that group project. And it goes without saying, but please stay away from things like I was the FHE family group coordinator, because in a global setting, I'm not sure that that's really going to help you too much. So it goes without saying. Internships, to the extent that you can get internships, that is the perfect way to get some experience and to make some connections. So look for those. Lots and lots of companies offer internships, and I welcome the opportunity to hire and bring in interns for the summer. So, and I would say most internships I think pay these days, but when I went to the Hill on the Washington Seminar Program, I was the only student that didn't have a paid internship. But I felt like it was a good opportunity, so I sucked it up and went, and I actually got hired from that. So don't discount something just because it isn't paid. If you think it's going to give you good experience, or it's going to open some doors for you, or help you make some good connections, be smart about taking those opportunities or looking at those opportunities as well. Okay, so internships, great opportunity for learning those skills. If that's not an option, volunteering is the new wave here. I know that from organizing committee standpoints, when we could then expand our staff and hire more, the first people we looked to were the volunteers who were toiling in the trenches, the people who had made themselves indispensable to us, who had found a need and had filled it, and we couldn't live without them. And the minute we got funding, we would hire those individuals. So don't discredit the importance of volunteering. There are 5Ks, there are charity events, the Utah Sports Commission. There's lots of things going on in Utah, the Huntsman Senior Games in St. George. There are lots of things in Utah as well as around the country where you can get some experience, make some connections, and look for opportunities to build upon that experience and to be able to include that in your resume. And I think more and more we're starting to see this volunteer model showing up, with the Invictus Games and some of these other events. So it is kind of the new value proposition. And as I said, find that need and fill it. Figure out what's not happening and make yourself indispensable, and be hungry, because I think it's more competitive than ever, especially in this international arena. And recognize that there are lots of ways to be involved with events. Mine is logistics and more involved from a hospitality and a protocol standpoint. But all of the big games, global games, need people to help with finances and sponsorship and marketing and communication, legal, human resources, athlete relations. So there are lots of different avenues that can also be pursued. And I should say that there are also university programs and even some European programs that can give you great experience. I think the real value with those are the connections that you can make. Those are a lot harder to get into, but there are certainly programs that didn't exist when I got into this space almost 30 years ago. The third and final point I want to tell you about trying to get the job is tell your story. They always say that in the first 7 seconds, people make 11 assumptions about you. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what they say. But I think it's true that people will make some assumptions about you right away. So you need to dress well, present yourself well, be on time, all of those just basic things, common sense, to help you with that first impression. Look people in the eye, be confident, if you're shaking hands, firm handshake, those kinds of things. But you want to tell them something interesting and memorable about you. So they're going to remember you, something that's unique, something that makes you kind of special. You also want to help them understand what your hard and soft skills are. If you speak a language, if you have, some great problem solving skills, if you have some technical skills, you want to help them understand kind of what you have to offer and where your skill set lies. And really what you're trying to tell them and show them is why they should hire you. And I think it's also really important here. We talked about tailoring the resume for the job. Be smart in your interview about the things that you are sharing, the things that you can do for them. I will never forget when we were hiring for the World Cup, and I was looking for someone to help with protocol in one of my cities. And a resume came in that just looked outstanding. And a guy came in, and right off the bat, all he could talk about was how much he loves soccer. Oh my gosh, I am so passionate about soccer, he said. I just love it. I follow it everywhere. I follow all the European leagues. I love soccer. I am so passionate about it. And I assumed that anybody who was applying to the organizing committee knew something about it and probably had some passion. That's good to know. That was kind of a fundamental understanding. But what he missed was that I was looking for someone to help with protocol, which meant I had a tribune of VIPs. And I needed somebody who was paying attention to my VIPs, not somebody who was so glued to what was happening on the pitch that they couldn't pay attention to what was happening. And as good as he looked on paper, instantly I thought, you're not the guy for this job. And I ended up hiring somebody who was phenomenal at that role in taking care and assessing the needs and the logistics and the operational needs of our Tribune and VVIP guests. So, make sure that you are understanding what that role and responsibility is and helping them to understand what you can do for them and why they should hire you. And I hate to even mention this, but please proof all of your written materials and your communication. I can't tell you how many times information comes to me and there are typos or something's not right or there's just a glaring. I had somebody recently who asked me if I would help someone that they had known and was looking for a job in the event industry. I said, sure, have them send over the resume. The resume came and there were 2 typos in the cover letter, and they sent me the redlined version of their resume, okay? It makes it hard to go to bat for somebody like that when they haven't given the time and attention. So please proof carefully and make sure that all of your written communication, all of your materials represent you well. You are going to have, in this competitive world, you're going to need every advantage you can get to distinguish yourself and to help that employer understand why they need you as part of their team. So, and then I think it's always good to express appreciation, gratitude. A handwritten thank you note is almost unheard of these days, but I think it gets you a lot of mileage and shows some thought and that you have distinguished yourself in some way. So those are my 3 tips for people who are trying to start out in the industry. Once you get that dream job, let me just give you a couple of observations. We've talked about how important it is to be professional, but more importantly, we've talked about how small this industry can be. That being a team player is paramount. Building the team. People want to work with people that they enjoy working with, who are competent, who do their work well, but who build the team, share information, and are really a team player. There have been some phenomenal people that I have worked with whose skills were out of the park in terms of how they could operate logistically and operationally. And they were so difficult to work with that nobody wanted to work with them. And because you see so many of the same people showing up in some of these same events, please be smart about building the team and giving credit and making sure that everybody feels successful in the effort so that people will want to work with you in the future. I think it's important to be a clear communicator, to be detailed and to be organized. In this industry, those are skills that are very valuable. And to be problem solving, you need to be able to have a clear head, to be a good problem solver, because the only thing that's ever guaranteed in the event industry is that nothing is ever going to go exactly right. And you're always going to have to go to plan B. Be accountable and take ownership of what you're responsible for. If you mess up, own it and figure out how to fix it. And we all make mistakes, but take ownership of what you're doing and be accountable for that. Be a hard worker and go the extra mile. Those are skills that are not always appreciated, but hopefully people will recognize that you have a strong work ethic and you're willing to do your part. The world of events, both international and domestic, can be wonderful and exhausting. So my advice to you would be to have fun and enjoy the ride. Thanks for coming along.